This episode 10 with John Cage. I was really worried that I wouldn't be able to properly do John Cage justice because so many things I couldn't really see to it how I could do him justice without being able to achieve some of the things I wanted to achieve. But come to find out that I was putting too much importance on the role I need to play here at the Beggar's Tomb, and by actively doing what I need to do in making this episode, I found out how much was done for me by John Cage, and moreover, other contributors to this. And not to give that just say contributors gives it too much. Let's start this back without a. We don't have a beginning or an end, so that's kind of good. So, but we're going to have to stick kind of close to the center to restore balance. I'll tell you the number at the end of this, what number episode this is, but I can't tell you yet because it's all part of what the drama. Trust me, I got one in mind. Well, so here's a funny question to consider. Who created the first creator? That's a fun question to consider because in the act of creation, a creator was invented. So, but then the creator didn't create itself, if that's the case. If the creator was existing and then created, then the creator didn't create the first creator. So, it's a dilemma. It's a fun question to try and wrap your mind around things. Trying to wrap your mind, that's going to be a reoccurring theme. John Cage did research in telepathy in two different ways. He did that. One time at least two, probably more, but two different ones I can bring into this story is that he one time tried to conduct an orchestra of radios tuned to different frequencies. And that was a way to try to demonstrate telepathy. Now, was he successful in that? Well, that depends on another way he tried. Get back to whether or not he was successful in either of these. The other way was his friend David Tudor was in a different room making different sounds that were available to him to make in that room. Outside of David Tudor's hearing was John Cage separately reading his writings in a means that David Tudor wouldn't be able to predict what he was reading, and then to join the two recordings that were being recorded simultaneously and see if indeed there was any matching connection between the two. And was he successful with either of these? That's where we get back with either of these. Was he successful? That depends on what your idea of success was. And did he create a recorded piece that's being discussed all these years later? Yes, and in that is successful. But John Cage himself said that his music, his favorite music, isn't the music that he's heard. It's the music that his favorite music is the music he hasn't heard yet. And so by trying to get to his favorite music, it becomes the end success of it, because it's kind of back to the point. It is what it is. It's a completed project. It was a project that was in a state of becoming, and now it's become. Which John Cage as a life has now become. Now as an afterlife, he's still in the state of becoming in the afterlife. Because his afterlife isn't over yet. But his life, as we're discussing it here, we can discuss it as a life because it's got a beginning and an end, and it's complete in that. So, go on to, because we already had the life of John Cage, which is fully become, we've only touched down on the surface of this afterlife that we got to discuss. Now, that's where, with Sobonibus ripped in half, it's rather easy to understand the meaning. But the meaning wasn't ripping it in half. Having it ripped in half was the problem I was starting with, so it didn't justify what it was. I was worried that I wasn't going to do John Cage justice, and I heard it through the grapevine that Neil Cassidy said to worry is a sin. Well, that makes sense, because if you're worried, then that means you're not having faith in things. And so I also feel that if you don't have worry and anticipation, if you got faith in things 100% that they're going to work out, and you don't care how they work out, then you lack the excitement. And I feel that there would be a hole missing. So that gives me cause to worry. So in order to fill that hole of the creating a worry, because we need to worry, I'm going to fill the hole of worrying. So there we go. We need this. It's to give drama and anticipation to the story, because without it, it would be incomplete. So, that being said, who said that a hole was the problem? Who said that? Can you find that quote for me? Who said it? Well, I just did. For one, I just said it in asking it, or did I say it? Did I state it, or did I ask it? You didn't see whether or not there was a punctuation mark. Punctuation marks are very, very important. Sometimes you're able to put them there, and sometimes you're not. And sometimes you're able to express them. And sometimes you're able to ask whether or not you expressed it. Well, John Cage, you have surely contributed to this magical season finale. For years and years, you created openings. Is it possible that those openings that you created in your life have been fulfilled in your afterlife? To consider the problem, let me tell you about Sabanibus. Sabanibus is spelled the same way, frontwards and backwards. But that's only viewing it from the outside in. That's only one half of what Sabanibus is, because the other half of Sabanibus' name is read from the inside out. If I had a name for God, if God was mine to give a name, was going to be born, say God was going to be born tomorrow, what name would I give God? Well, I have to go back afresh, because I couldn't give, I pondered this question at one time, because there are names people call God, and they mean a lot to them, but because it's different names, it almost, in language, it's felt to me like, I was hearing different names for God, so I felt like search for the name myself in the present form, not an existing name. And in the search of that, I looked into things and looked towards a beginning. And I realized, though, that to name God, I would be naming myself God if I was in a position to give God the name. But then I would be naming the universe, and I would be, also naming all the problems that were there before I got here and before I left. So, John Cage said the favorite music is the music he hasn't heard yet. So, I figured that maybe, I didn't figure because John Cage said it, but looking back at what I've learned and how I can justify what I did back then, I can say, looking back at this, to draw a linear line into the past, I approach it saying that, well, God hadn't heard the name I came up with yet, so I thought this new name up for either the universe or God, because I needed to approach it in a way that could be agreed upon with my own belief in what I was seeing, and what I was seeing to not state it to be more or less than what it was. Now, without considering, I felt it would be the best to try and to unify things, and not only peoples, but to unify the living and the dead, the past and the present. But that only gave me half of the name, and the first half of the name I came up with was Sobus. Not especially creative, because I was basically thinking of something, and Sobus was short for something, and physicists already had a name for that I was naming, and that was matter. everything that has mass and takes up space is what I called Sobus. But that's not the reason why. If I was just that name, I hadn't brought anything together. Not only had I not qualified as feeling confident I'd solved something that religious people could tune to instead of the names they already had, but also had just disputed a name that the physicists already seemed in agreement upon. So now, not only am I not solving the problems with what was going to be going on in, with the church's things, I also was meddling in something where there wasn't a dispute. Nonetheless, because I felt, that physicists had committed an injustice, not in their name of matter. Matter may be better than Sobus, especially since it's something we already all understand to a degree, matter. Anything that has mass and takes up space is matter. That's understood. So, but what they didn't appreciate is the other half of what I looked out and saw the universe. I see, now who created it? This gets back to holes. There's basically what I ponder when I ponder the universe is some matter inside a big hole, and then holes within the matter even. There's lots of holes, and that's can't go without being stated. And the theoretical name that people have called it by, because we're talking about something that's invisible and unmeasurable. There's nothing you can really wrap your mind around it, because it's wrapped around our minds literally. And that name I came up for was Novus. And in coming up with the name Novus, I realized what was wrong with the first name I came up with. So, if I was to name God, his name was if I would name God, if he was my name, if I realized I'd be naming myself. God had been called by various names, but I had not heard one of those names existing in the past that I could understand the basics of where exactly it came from. And if it was spoken, I wasn't there at the time it was spoken. And I hadn't heard it from God. And God, that's name, so wasn't what spoke to me was in my communication with search. And in that search, I named what I found. And whether or not that was God or not, or lack of God, it was what I found, and it is what I named. Now, I think that that Novus has lacked representation, and it does appear from my perspective that it's far more in terms of what's there as far as what we see. So, in the name of that is what I will tell you now is the name of this episode, but the name has to have a number. So, the name that for the third name that I came up with is Sobon, in correction of Sobus, because Sobus spelled the same frontwards or backwards, and that's a nice, neat, balanced thing. But Novus was not. So, to correct that and bring balance, and bring about that fourth name, which is already stated in the beginning. So, the fourth one, that preceded the first one, in my telling of it, was actually the fourth one in the completion. So, this is episode -4. Now, how did I get -4 is because, well, there's been episode 1 and then episode 3. So, to restore balance, we have to go back to the other side to bring in what's 1 plus 3 is 4. So here's episode -4 to restore balance and also give you rationality to something I call Sabonibus. But that's not God's name, or it's not the universe's name. That's a name that I came across in traveling in search of it. And that's something that John Cage once, I understood him to have said, is that he said that God is like a body of water that we come to from different directions. And because of the different directions we come to it, we call it by a different name. So I can only name the path that I took. And your path, and it won't get you there because it didn't start where you start. And you'll have to find that on your own. But I'm here to tell you more about John Cage because I want to. And if I can, I will. And if I don't, then I left plenty of holes to be filled in. And that's good to have because it's in tribute to Novus. The great unfathomable thing, Novus, is, kind of like you think, it kind of gets back to creation, the creation story, where Satan was created first, but he was perfect, or, lacking in nothing, felt he was perfect. That is, and in that, even in God's perception, that great beauty, then lacking of nothing, it didn't create the desired effect, or it didn't create something that humans, none of us have everything. We all have the lacking. And it says somewhere in the Bible, I always have trouble finding it, and it's kind of good that I have trouble finding it because it's something that comes when it wants to and goes away when it wants to. I don't know the number of it, and I'm not really trying to. But it's in the epistles. It's after Acts, and the story has been told, but it's in letters that are written, and it says that in our iniquities we are made perfect, and that gets back to who made the holes. Now, what I called Novus, and referring to the holes, is that in our iniquities we are made perfect, because in the joining up of things together, and this, what I feel the Grateful Dead is such a great representation of. It's all these guys from different aspects coming in together to work on a common thing, and the Beggar's Tomb is reaching out beyond the band to pull more stuff into this channel I call the Beggar's Tomb. And the thing is, it's because of the balance and the lacking of things have as their separate parts establish things out to the whole. So in the lacking of faith that we have sometimes, and in the worry, and in the sin of the worry, because it is a lack in faith, then we have the need for the fulfillment for God, and anyhow we have that relationship, and it's ongoing, or we don't have the relationship, in which case we have what we have. But I have what I have, and you have what you have, and you have episode -4 in your hands. Enjoy it. Love you. Have a great day.